You remember in the big sweep in Virginia that took place a couple months ago, I guess. One of the people who won a seat in the Virginia state elections was a guy who had basically shunned the support from the Democratic Party because of the way that they were messing with him. And his name is Lee Carter. He is a member of the DSA. I think he's the first DSA member in the country who has a state Senate seat. Is that right? I don't know if that's the case, but maybe. Sounds right. Here he is in the state Senate, and this is disgusting because he is talking about the implications of how poor people get dispossessed and people living in poverty, I should say, and kicked out of their homes. And it's apparently super offensive to this Virginian Democrat, Mark Keam, who is a former lobbyist for Verizon, sitting behind Lee Carter. So listen to Lee Carter. And as he starts to say these things, think about what your reaction would be if you were a fellow lawmaker and you were not a sort of a scumbag-ish type of guy. And then wait to this, because this Mark Keam is sitting behind him making faces, and then apparently I thought he was texting somebody on his iPad, but it seems not. Here we go.
It's a good faith effort to try to help combat poverty in some very impoverished areas in Virginia. I believe it relies on a very deeply flawed mechanism. That mechanism.
Pause it for 1 second. So, I mean, look at the way that he's approaching this, which I think is actually a really a smart way to approach it. I appreciate your attempt to create these sort of enterprise zones or whatever it is, these discounts on taxes, whatever it is, private-public partnership, as a sincere attempt to deal with the problems of poverty. But I think it's a very flawed mechanism, is what he says.
Very deeply flawed mechanism. That mechanism of racing to the bottom, of cutting, hacking, and slashing away at our tax code to try to fight over scraps and handouts from billionaires rather than trying to build the economy from the ground up that will actually help the people that are already here. And we've done this a lot in
Pause it. There's Mark Keam. He just, when he hears that part about getting scraps from billionaires, he's completely blown away. He can't even believe it. He's giggling. He's back there. He's just, wow. I hope his constituents see this.
That will actually help the people that are already here. And we've done this a lot in Northern Virginia, and it's made Northern Virginia a lot richer on paper. But it hasn't made the people of Northern Virginia richer. It's changed the people in Northern Virginia. And I'm a transplant, so I'm guilty of it. But what we've seen is as the Economic Development Partnership has pumped more and more money into Northern Virginia to get more and more businesses there, we've seen people who grew up in Alexandria and Arlington, they had to move out to Fairfax because they couldn't afford it. Then they couldn't afford Fairfax, they had to move out to Manassas. Now they can't afford Manassas, they're having to move out to Fauquier and Stafford, and they're driving an hour and a half each way every morning to go to a job that pays $9 an hour. And in my district, we've got entire low-income neighborhoods where we're having to fight the bulldozers because we've got out-of-state money that's trying to come in and buy up property that people are living on right now and kicking them out. And, it may make the locality look richer on paper. It'll look like you've done something about poverty. But at the end of the day, if this does what has happened in Northern Virginia, what will happen in Southwest and South Side and the Eastern Shore?
Pause it. So there, right as he's saying that, the Mark Keam, the douchey representative, finally lands on what he was trying to find, which is the hammer-and-sickle, I guess the old USSR flag. And holds it up on his iPad as Lee Carter is talking about the fact that on paper it will look like these regions have dealt with poverty, but in fact all you've done is shoved the people living in poverty out of the district and created the problem somewhere else.
He's talking about doing something real for poor people. God damn it, I need to get a better image of having a Soviet flag to put over his head.
I mean, that's what this guy's doing.
This guy's such an unbelievable moron. He's a perfect expression.
I hope, I mean, if, never mind a primary. I mean, I would be perfectly happy with a Republican printing this out and handing these leaflets around and holding it up and just holding it up and saying like, look, this is what this guy's doing while somebody's talking about helping his constituents.
And thank you. This is great branding for democratic socialism. He's talking about delivering for actual things, and you are doing just an embarrassing display behind him. Thanks.
This is a guy who apparently voted with the Republicans on this really bad anti-discrimination amendment, right? This is the one. Was this the one? Was this which amendment was this?
I don't know yet.
And he apparently wrote, I guess on Twitter. When was this? When did he write? A couple of days ago. In case you're wondering why I voted with the Virginia House Republicans on anti-discrimination amendment to the House budget, the answer is simple. I screwed up. For 9 years in the Virginia House, I've always voted for equality and against discrimination. Sorry to have surprised my Virginia House Dem colleagues. Maybe this guy should be paying more attention to his job.
Like someone in front of me is talking about civil
iPad.
rights. Look, I got it. Wait, what's a good George Michael picture?
I just got a new
I gotta put it up
iPad,
behind
man.
it.
Sorry about the anti-discrimination bill. I was playing solitaire.
He was also a Verizon executive.
A lobbyist.
I'm a huge fan of Elton John. That's number one.
All right, let's just hear the rest of what Lee Carter's talking about.
What will happen in Southwest and South Side and the Eastern Shore, and particularly, I think Petersburg is particularly susceptible to this. What will happen is you won't have any poor people in those localities anymore, but it won't be because you've helped the poor people. It's because you've moved them to other localities. So this is something that I simply cannot support. I didn't support the House version of it. I can't support the Senate version of it. I thank the patron for trying to do something about poverty. It's desperately overdue, but this is not the mechanism by which to do it.
I mean, put aside the fact that this D-bag in the back there was holding up this thing. That is an incredibly cogent and insightful explanation of what's problematic with those type of public-private partnerships. It's not dealing with the core issue. It is pushing it aside in some ways.
I don't know if it's if it's possible to look more immature than Keam in 2 minutes.
Honestly, man,
it's a very evocative contrast, to say the least.